Good morning. Welcome to Conversations with Carla. Good morning and welcome back. This is Conversations with Carla, and my name is Carla Harris, and we are brought to you by the People Institute. So today we continue our series, Black at Work, and our topic today is being Black and the board. So many people would say that the pinnacle of reaching your career success is sitting on a board, whether it's a large nonprofit board, and of course, the highest is a corporate board. But how do we do that in times of today where it doesn't matter our experience, our education, the network that we have? It's very, very challenging. Even as recent as July 2020, companies like Delta Airlines, whose CEO, Ed Bastian, said that they intend to appoint more Black board members over the next couple of years. In the past 2 years, Delta has added 2 board members, both of whom are white men. They currently have 2 Black board members on a 12-member board, and there is not one single Black man or woman serving in Delta's top 11 executive roles. And that's what we're talking about today. In 2020, we're still battling, crossing the hurdles, climbing Mount Everest to be in positions of leadership. My guests today are board experts. First, we have Daphne E. Jones. She is currently an independent board director. She is a Fortune 50 retiree. She has served as Senior Vice President and CIO of GE Healthcare, Senior Vice President and CIO of Hospira, which is now Pfizer, VP and CIO of Ortho Clinical Diagnostics with Johnson & Johnson. She's currently the an independent board of director for AMN Healthcare, Barnes Group, and the Masonite International Corporation. My second guest is Dr. Rustin Lewis. Dr. Rustin Lewis is a an adjunct professor of nonprofit management at the University of the District of Columbia. He currently serves as the executive director for communities in school in Washington, D.C. He has served as the regional executive director for College Summit, the president of National Cares Mentoring Movement, and the CEO of College Bound. If you can welcome our guests with me, Daphne Jones and Dr. Rustin Lewis.
Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you both and welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate both of you. So I think we have quite the country represented. So I'm in Florida. Dr. Lewis, you're in Washington, D.C. And Daphne, you are in the great state of New York?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Good,
I'm not in New York.
Good.
City.
Excellent.
New York.
Okay, perfect. So we also welcome you guys to join us with your comments and your questions. But let's just jump right into it. I'd like to show you guys a quick picture, and let's just talk about it. So when you take a look at this picture of this board of directors, what do you think?
They have great suits on.
Great suits, no color, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
literally.
This would be a representative.
No color.
Say again, Rustin? No
I don't
color.
recognize anyone.
So this would be what we would probably consider the old boys club, right? I mean, this
Yes.
is like back in the day. This is what boards of directors look like. This is who really organized our finances and our nonprofits and things like that. So I want you to take a look at this picture. So this picture is a little bit more current. So this board is the board of directors for eBay. Again, more current, still no color,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So now we look at this organization. This is the board of directors for the American Diabetes Association. This is a great representation of our country at large, of the people that they serve in an organization. So I want to ask you guys, why is it so hard to go from this to this? Daphne, why don't you take us out? Start the conversation.
Well, I think that companies are now increasingly going in that direction that you see, the more diverse picture.
Mm-hmm.
Boards started easily 400 years ago in the 1600s. And the role that Black people played in that time frame. So it's been based on heredity and history that the boards look the way they look. However, um, since the latest challenge that we've had with social injustice awakening, I think boards are now taking a look at their purpose. They're looking at their values. Board, everything from UPS to Nike to Ernst and Young to the NBA, they're all kind of reflecting and introspecting on who they stand for, and they're recognizing more that it's truly a business issue to have more diversity in their leadership and in their boards. So in the picture that you showed where there was more women, there started to be the focus on women, right? And that's going to continue to happen now with the George Floyd crisis and social injustice awakening. You're going to see more focus on Black people now in boards and leadership.
So do you think that it's just a PR stunt?
Well, I serve on boards where it's not. So I can't speak for every corporation, but the
Mm-hmm.
friends that I've spoken to who are also on boards and serve on boards, they're finding that the leadership team and the boards themselves are looking to get educated on what is the issue. And then when they educate on that, then they start to acknowledge that this is truly a real issue. But more importantly, I'm seeing companies starting to act, and they're doing everything from how they're going to procure differently with minority women and Black enterprises to how they're going to make sure that they democratize the hiring process. So there are some things that are very public and visible, and like making statements and doing videos, but there are other things that are very internal that no one will see except the employees themselves, and the metrics that will show for themselves when they measure their actions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So those are specifically, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. So are you talking more focused on corporate boards versus nonprofit, or are you seeing this across the board?
I'm seeing it where I am now is more in the corporate for-profit segments. That's where I serve today. I have served in not-for-profit organizations and served on those boards. And you're right, they were more diverse. I think when you get paid to serve on a board, you start talking about money, it seems to be a little bit more restrictive and exclusive. When you are serving on a not-for-profit board, sometimes you have to pay the company to serve on that board. Either you get the money or you give the money. Whereas on corporate boards that are for profit, you earn fees. So it's a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
exclusive.
Okay, okay. So Rustin, your experience is more in the nonprofit sector. What is your thought about diversity in your experience with the nonprofit or not for profit? So we hear it both ways. So is it nonprofit or is it not for profit? Which is the proper terminology?
I think they're both correct. I think it's
Okay,
probably
good.
just a phonetic decision to make. I agree with Ms. Jones. I think certainly in light of Mr. Floyd's passing, there is certainly a reemergence of the conversation. I would argue that nonprofits have had this conversation intermediately over the last couple of decades. And surprisingly, one of my former consultant clients once said to me, well, we don't know how to find persons of color to serve on the board, which was awing to me because I'm here in Washington, D.C. So we have one of the most highly educated, professional, well accomplished uh, group of minorities across the country living here in Washington, D.C. But yet they were having difficulty finding persons of color to serve on the board. So I think the question becomes moving beyond conversation and many boards knowing that this is important to have diversity on the board, moving from conversation to actual action. And quite honestly, I think it demands persons of color to help inform other people how to recruit people of color to boards. So it's sort of a cyclical conversation. If you don't have people of color on the board to help you identify people of color, then you may feel in a stagnant position.
So, Daphne, I did a little bit in preparation for our call today. The percentage of African American independent directors dropped from 13% in 2019 to 11% in 2020. So, how can companies with little or no diversity really impact or reflect or serve the communities that are far more diverse than their leadership represents?
Yeah, I think that's a $1 million question. And for anyone who knows me or has heard me speak on the Forbes podcast a couple of weeks ago, you know that I believe that unless you have leaders that reflect the community, the demographics, the customers that you are trying to reach and to serve, it'll be very hard to do. So I think some companies just don't care. Be honest with you, there's some companies that are faking it. They're pretending or acting as if they understand the customer journey. And then there are people that are companies that are probably paying a lot of money for research data that it shows the inclusive information about minorities and blacks and people of color. And so I think it goes the spectrum to not caring, to trying to fake it, to paying money for it, and then or actually having it. If you have a diverse board, you will likely have a diverse senior leadership team. And if you have a diverse senior leadership team, it's likely you'll have diversity in the lower parts of the organization. But it's not only about diversity, it's also about inclusion. It's about belonging, feeling that you belong in the environment. So when you have employees, even though you may have a diverse set of employees, if they don't get invited to the creative conversations, if they don't get invited to help with the design process of a new solution, and they don't feel that they belong, then they won't be able to really create solutions for those customers. So it starts at the top. It is truly a CEO and board imperative. It's not something that can be outsourced or relegated or delegated to the leaders in the organization. And we can have all of the affinity groups and resource groups that are bottoms up, but until this is a top-down business imperative, they won't be able to serve their customers in an authentic way.
Absolutely. I think that so I've served on a number of nonprofit boards, and one of the areas that I find where we get into a stagnation in leadership are by term limits or turnover. So, what do you think about that, Rustin? Do you believe that when we have extenuated terms or lack of turnover on these organizational leaderships, or what are they doing to refresh the seats, offering those openings to people of color and things like that?
Well, I think it's all tied together. Boards, particularly nonprofit boards, are often challenged to get people on the board unless they're like a well-known entity, like you're getting on the United Way board or Boys and Girls Club of America board. But the smaller boards, often it's harder to get people on your board, particularly if you have a give and get policy, which is the policy around fundraising for the organization. It's the expectation that a board member will give a certain amount of money or get that certain amount of money. I also think we have to talk about the barriers, because for many people, the give and get policy can be a barrier to serving on a board. So when you look at all of those pieces, going back to your original question about turnover, there's a tendency to say, okay, well, we have a person who's willing to donate or get $2,500 a year. Let's keep them on the board. Or we have a high donor who's able to get $10,000 from their family foundation. Let's keep them on the board. And if you keep them on the board, then you're not turning those seats over and you're not bringing new energy and new ideas to the board. But it's a catch-22 because you certainly want to maintain that donor level.
That was great information. So we do have some questions and comments, but I'd like to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
When the protests are over and we go back to work, is your team ready to have a talk? Diversity in the workplace is about respect, perspective, and the courage to have difficult conversations. How do you talk about race at work? The People Institute facilitates courageous conversations, uncovers different perspectives, and encourages respectful discussion. The time to take action is now. Uncover the unconscious bias in your workplace. Schedule a discovery call with the People Institute today. 754-218-5288.
Welcome back. So let's get to some questions. We do have a couple of questions. So our first question is from Glenn. He says, how do we change perceptions, or more importantly, our frames of reference when it comes to change that must occur when it comes to diversity and inclusion on boards, as well as the companies we work with? So I guess how do we change our perceptions and our frame of reference when it comes to diversity within organizations? So Rustin, why don't you start with that from a nonprofit perspective, and then Daphne, why don't you take it from the corporate perspective?
Certainly. Well, I think that we have to challenge ourselves to, one, change our own frame of reference. If we're on a board, we have to continuously have these conversations. It should be just as important as reviewing our financial statement. I think we have to have intentional actions, and I see that often these approaches to being more inclusive tend to be a result of some other action or somebody else or something somebody else did versus us taking charge of the situations ourselves.
And Daphne?
Yeah, I tend to look at things in a process framework, and it does start with the openness and desire. If there is no desire, if there is no interest in understanding, then it just won't happen. So it first has to come internally with the desire. Okay, so let's assume we have the desire to be open and to change our frame of reference. It starts with education. One of the companies that I'm very familiar with has created a 21-day challenge for any employee that wants to be a part of it. And in that 21-day challenge, every day for 15 to 30 minutes, employees either have to read, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and then finally reflect on where they are and where they think they could be going as it relates to understanding the human injustice that's happening. So there's an education that needs to happen. And when that education happens from the CEO, my CEOs, I've spent hours with them already on this topic. We have our board who is also, I've sent videos, Muhammad Ali video, I've sent the Jane Elliott videos, the How Can We Win video. So education is number one, after there's the openness. Number two, there's the acknowledgement. Oh, I now see this through a different lens. I am a white male. I've never had to look at it this way. Now that I've been educated, and now that I have heard stories from people like Daphne and Dr. Lewis, I get it now. I acknowledge there's a problem. And when you acknowledge there's a problem, then you have to decide, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to just, let every employee have Martin Luther King Day off and kind of check the box? Or are you going to do something really much more deeper to change the culture of the company, to change the culture of yourself? And then you have to act and measure. And we don't get what we don't measure. And so you have to act on something. And I created for my companies what I call the 5 Ps. You have to act on the people. You have to act on policy. You have to act on the pipeline. But, to Dr. Lewis's point is, where are all the Black people? Look at the pipeline and demand that your search firms are bringing in candidates that are Black, and they do exist. And then there's procurement, and then there's philanthropy. Are we giving money to the anti-hate crimes bill? So it starts with education, it moves to acknowledgement and a decision, and then it ends with some actions that you measure. And then when you do that, it's like exercising a new muscle. It grows over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen.
Yeah. Great information. Great information. So another question. So first of all, I found some information that I thought was really interesting. These are the 2018 Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 findings. And this is from the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance. So it looks like they're actually not very far off. This is, of course, 2 years ago. So on Fortune 500 organizations, we have 4.6% minority women, 11% minority men, 17 or 18% Caucasian white women, and 66% white males. So these are board seats on Fortune 500 in mass. For Fortune 100, we have 6% minority women, 14% minority men, 19% Caucasian women, and 61% Caucasian white men. So understanding your 5 Ps to act and measure, Daphne, what is the process or the onboarding process for bringing new board members on? According to the article I read when we first started, Delta says 2 years, over the next couple of years, they're looking to bring on more African American board members. Is that a reasonable time frame for bringing on new board members?
Yes, I would say it is, but it's specific. You have to look at the context of the company itself. Delta has whatever number of board members they have. They have a strategy, a business strategy that's, let's say, 2 to 4 or 5 years, that's probably has changed in light of transportation almost coming to a halt and the number of riders, going down. And so their strategy has to say, what kind of leadership are we going to be looking for from a skills standpoint on the board? So, and then we have to go after those skills. So there's term limits. They have to make sure that they know that they may have a 75-year-old on the board, or the person may be 73 years old today, and their term limit is 75. So they know that in 2 years or 1 year, someone or some people are going to be leaving the board. So a combination of looking at their term limits and looking at the skills gap and what they need to bring onto their board, whether it be diverse talent, people who understand cybersecurity, people who understand digital transformation. They look at those skills and they say, we're going to need these specific skills in the next 2 years. and they know that they have people that will either leave, or some boards, some companies expand their boards by 1 or 2 people. So they may have 10 people today. They can say, well, for 2 years, we're going to have 12 people on the board. And then they expand, they shrink it back down to 10. So a company they can change it in 3 months. Doesn't have to be 2 years. It could be a very short period of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this conversation. So
Right.
I always like to ask my guests to leave us with 3 things that you want us to walk away with. So, Dr. Lewis, I'm going to start with you. What are the top 3 things you would want to leave us with today?
Well, and I'll incorporate this in something I had hoped we would have touched upon, but know why you want to serve on a board.
Mm.
It's important to have diversity, but understand the expectations, the give and get, the legal ramifications, your duty of care, your duty of loyalty. Understand what the expectation is for you to serve on the board. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to encourage the audience is to step outside of their circles. There's a tendency for the existing board members to only recruit friends that they know or people they worked with. You have to go to other organizations. If you're looking for, and I'll just give one example, there's a bunch of them, an organization that's seeking to bring on a person of color, maybe you reach out to the Black MBA or the Black Public Administration Association. But there are strategies that you can impose to recruit people of color if you really want to begin to have that conversation about diversifying your board. And third, I'm going to bunch this together: engage, coach, and inspire. And I saw that in the back behind you. And I think that's sort of where we start. You engage your community, you engage people on the board with you, you coach other people to come on the board, and you inspire them to stay and make sure that they have all the tools that they need so they're comfortable when they are on the board. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And Daphne, how about you? What are your top 3 nuggets that you're going to leave us with today?
Yeah, I would say that we should remember that we're not here by ourselves and we're not here for ourselves. And so from a leadership perspective, whether you're on the board or not on the board, you've got to bring your talents, your gifts, and your key capabilities to the table. That if you're not on a board, let your cultural differences and your cultural advantage and your knowledge about business and whatnot be known. Do I want to be that Black person and the only Black person on the board who is going to be challenging the status quo? The answer now is yes, because they didn't bring me on to be like everybody else. They brought me on because of my business knowledge. They brought me on because of my different perspective of humanity. And they brought me on just because of my skills. So I encourage you guys to don't shy from who you are and what you bring to the table. Number 2, if you want to be on a board, I believe Dr. Lewis is right. You got to know why. You have to know what you will bring to the table, and you have to know what you want to get out of being on a board. And you have to tell everybody that you know that you want to be on a board, because it really is through relationships and networking. Only about 25 or 30% of board seats are filled through Korn Ferry and Russell Reynolds and those kinds of recruiters. It's really through relationships. Number 3, I've heard people say, I don't see color. But instead of there being a period at the end of that sentence, there should be a comma. And that sentence should read, I don't see color as a methodology for how my company will decide who wins and who loses. I don't see color as a criteria that should limit the growth of people that have potential, that have great work ethic and deliver results. I don't see color as a reason for anybody to die. So I believe the best is yet in front of us in our future. I think you're going to see different demographics show up on boards, because the time is now for companies to be reassessing who they are and who their culture is. And they want to be on the right side of history, and they want to win in the marketplace. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent, excellent. Thank you to both of you for joining me today. And I just I really love having this kind of dialogue. I think we need it as a community. We need it in our business practices. We need it in our social communities. We cannot let this conversation be pushed under the rug any longer. So here we are, Conversations with Carla. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Rustin. I appreciate you. I'm going to just take us out. I'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you again for